My name is Hazel Santos. I am 32 years old, and I live in a quiet city 3 hours away from Rochester. I stood silently at the defendant's table. My hands were resting flat on the wood, and I kept my face very calm. Across the aisle, my brother Vincent looked like he had already won. He stood tall, adjusting his expensive suit, and told the judge that my company was a financial disaster. My parents sat right behind him. They were nodding their heads. They looked at me with disappointment, just like they always did. They wanted to see me fail. They wanted to prove that I was nothing without them. But then, Judge Holloway stopped speaking. She froze in the middle of a sentence. Her eyes went wide as she looked down at the legal papers in front of her. She read the company name out loud, her voice confused. Apex Defense Systems. She looked up at me, then back at the paper. She knew that name. Everyone in the industry knew that name. My company had just secured a $189 million contract with the Department of Defense. It was headline news. Everyone knew it, except my family. In that instant, the entire mood in the courtroom shifted. The judge looked at Vincent with cold, hard eyes. He didn't know it yet, but he had just walked into a trap of his own making. But before I tell you how everything flipped, like and subscribe, drop a comment. Where are you watching from? My name is Hazel Santos. I am 32 years old. To understand why my family tried to destroy me, you have to understand the house I grew up in. It was a large, cold house in Rochester. It looked perfect from the outside. The lawn was always cut very short. The hedges were straight. The paint was a crisp, clean white. My father, Antonio Morty, made sure everything looked perfect. He owned a chain of luxury car dealerships. In our town, the name Morty meant money. It meant success. But inside that house, it meant competition. There were 3 of us children. Vincent was the oldest. He was the golden boy. He looked just like my father, tall, loud, and confident. From the day Vincent was born, my father decided that Vincent would take over the business. Vincent could do no wrong. If he failed a test, it was the teacher's fault. If he crashed a car, it was the road's fault. Then there was Carla. She was the youngest. She was beautiful and she knew it. My mother, Maria, spent all her time with Carla. They went shopping every weekend. They planned parties. My mother taught Carla that her job in life was to marry a rich man and look good standing next to him. And then there was me, Hazel, the middle child. The mistake, I didn't look like them. I was quieter. I didn't care about clothes or cars or parties. I liked to take things apart. When I was 10, I took apart our toaster because I wanted to see how the heating element worked. My mother didn't see curiosity. She saw a mess. She screamed at me for an hour about how I was unnatural. My father just shook his head. Why can't you be normal, Hazel? Look at your sister. I spent my teenage years hiding in my room. While Vincent was out partying and Carla was at dance recitals, I was on my computer. I loved code. I loved the logic of it. In the real world, people lied. People were confusing. But on a computer, if you wrote the code effectively, it worked. It was fair. My family hated it. I remember one dinner vividly. I was 16. We were sitting at the long mahogany table. My mother had set it with the good china because my uncle was visiting. Vincent is taking a role in the sales department next summer, my father announced, beaming. He clapped Vincent on the shoulder. He's a natural. He sold 2 cars just walking through the lot yesterday. That's wonderful, my uncle said. And Carla, my mother added, was just voted prom queen. They all smiled. They clinked their glasses. Then my uncle looked at me. And what about you, Hazel? What are you up to? I swallowed my food. I was nervous, but I was also proud. I actually just won a state coding competition, I said. I built a program that helps organize library databases. The university is interested in it. The table went silent. My father put down his fork. He looked at me with a mix of boredom and annoyance. Computers, he said. He said the word like it was something dirty. You're wasting your time with that nonsense, Hazel. You can't talk to a computer screen. Business is about people. It's about shaking hands. It's not nonsense, I said quietly. It's the future. It's a hobby for nerds, Vincent laughed. He took a sip of his wine. She just sits in the dark all day, Dad. It's creepy. It is a little strange, my mother agreed, adjusting her pearls. Hazel, you need to focus on your appearance more. No successful man wants a wife who stares at a screen and wears baggy sweaters. I felt my face get hot. I don't want a husband, I said. I want a career, my father laughed. It was a loud, booming sound. A career, doing what? Fixing printers. They all laughed. My uncle, my mother, my brother, they laughed at my ambition. They laughed at my passion. That was the dynamic. They didn't just ignore me. They actively rooted against me. They needed me to be the loser so they could feel like winners. If I succeeded, it made them uncomfortable. It didn't fit the story they told themselves. In the Morty dynasty, Vincent was the king, Carla was the princess, and I was the servant who was supposed to stay in the background. I learned a hard lesson that night. They didn't want my success. They wanted my obedience. They wanted me to be small so they could feel big. By the time I was 22, I had graduated college. I paid for it myself with scholarships and part-time jobs fixing computers. My parents didn't pay a dime. They bought Vincent a condo when he graduated. They bought Carla a brand new convertible. For me, they gave me a card. Inside, my mother had written, "Maybe now you can find a real job and settle down." I realized then that it would never change. I could become the president of the United States, and they would still ask me why I wasn't as popular as Carla. I was starving for their love, but they were feeding me poison. I had to make a choice. I could stay in Rochester, work a low-level job, and come to Sunday dinners to be insulted. Or I could leave. I chose to leave. I left when I was 24. I didn't make a big announcement. I didn't throw a tantrum. I just packed my old Honda Civic with my clothes, my books, and my desktop computer. I moved 3 hours away to a city where nobody knew the name Morty. I had no money. I had no investors. I had no family support. I rented a small, drafty garage behind a mechanic's shop. It wasn't a cool, startup garage like you see in movies. It was dirty. It smelled like oil and old tires. In the winter, it was freezing. I had to wear fingerless gloves so I could type without my hands going numb. I slept on a futon in the corner. I joined a cheap gym nearby just so I could use the showers. I ate instant ramen noodles for lunch and dinner almost every day. Sometimes, if I had a good week, I would buy a bag of apples. It was the hardest time of my life, but it was also the best. Because for the first time, nobody was telling me I couldn't do it. My idea was simple but difficult to build. I wanted to create a new kind of cybersecurity system. Most systems reacted to attacks after they happened. I wanted to build an AI that could predict attacks before they happened. I called it Apex. I worked 18 hours a day. I woke up, coded, ate, coded, and slept. My eyes hurt constantly. My back ached from the cheap chair I sat in. My family barely called. Sometimes my mother would call on a Sunday. The conversations were always the same. "Hazel, are you still in that place?" she would ask. "Yes, Mom. I'm working." "Vincent just got promoted to vice president of the dealerships," she would say. "He bought a boat, a beautiful boat. We're going out on the lake this weekend. It's a shame you're stuck in a garage." "I'm happy for him," I would lie. "When are you going to come home and be reasonable?" she would sigh. "Your father says he can get you a job at the front desk. Answering phones. It pays decent money, Hazel. You could buy decent clothes." "I'm building something, Mom. I don't want to answer phones." "Stubborn," she would say. "You were always too stubborn." I stopped answering the phone as much. It hurt too much. Every call made me feel small again. Every call made me doubt myself. Was I crazy? Was I wasting my life in a cold garage while my brother was buying boats? There were nights I wanted to quit. One night in November, the heater in the garage broke. It was 10 degrees outside. I sat wrapped in 3 blankets, shivering, staring at a line of code that wouldn't work. I was hungry. I was lonely. I started to cry. I thought about calling my dad. I thought about begging him for that receptionist job. I just wanted to be warm. But then I imagined the look on Vincent's face. I imagined him smirking. I imagined him saying, "I told you so." That anger warmed me up more than any heater. I wiped my eyes. I put my hands back on the keyboard. I kept working. The only time I saw them was Christmas. I felt obligated to go. I would drive the 3 hours back to Rochester. I would wear my best clothes, but they were still cheap compared to what Carla wore. I would walk into the house, and it would smell like expensive perfume and roast beef. The tree was perfect. The presents were piled high. Vincent would be there, holding a glass of scotch. He would look me up and down. "Well, look who it is," he would say. "The hermit returns. How's the little computer hobby going, Hazel? Made $1 million yet?" My father would chuckle from his armchair. "Don't tease her, Vincent. At least she's keeping busy." "I'm not teasing," Vincent would say, grinning. "I'm worried. She looks thin. Can you afford food, Hazel? Or do you need me to write you a check?" "I'm fine," I would say, keeping my voice steady. "The business is growing." "Business," Vincent would scoff. It's a science project, Hazel. Real business is bricks and mortar. Real business is inventory. You're playing make-believe. I would sit through dinner, listening to them brag. Vincent talked about his trips to Europe. Carla talked about her fiancé's stock portfolio. My mother talked about the country club gossip. Nobody asked me a single question about my life. Nobody asked how my software worked. Nobody asked if I was happy. I was just a ghost at the table. I would leave as soon as dessert was over. I would drive back to my cold garage, tears streaming down my face. But every time I left, I made a promise to myself. One day, they will know who I am. One day, I won't be the joke. I didn't know how right I was. I didn't know that I was building something that would become bigger than their entire dealership empire. I just kept my head down. I kept coding. I kept surviving. Success didn't happen overnight. It was a slow climb, and then suddenly it was an explosion. By year 4, I moved out of the garage. I got a small office in an industrial park. It wasn't fancy, but it had heat and a real door. I hired my first 2 employees. We got a contract with a mid-sized bank to secure their customer data. It wasn't a fortune, but it paid the bills. For the first time, I could afford a nice apartment. By year 7, Apex Defense Systems had 47 employees. We were building a reputation. My software was faster and smarter than anything else on the market. We started getting calls from bigger clients. Tech companies in Silicon Valley, government agencies. I was working harder than ever, but it was a different kind of work. I wasn't just a coder anymore, I was a CEO. I had to learn how to lead. I had to learn how to negotiate. I met my husband, David, during this time. He was an engineer at a conference. He was the first person who looked at me and didn't see a weird girl. He saw a genius. He saw a leader. When we got married, I took his last name, Santos. I started using Hazel Santos professionally. At first, it was just because I liked the sound of it. But then I realized it was a shield. To the business world, I was Hazel Santos, the CEO of Apex. To my family, I was still Hazel Morty, the failure. I kept the 2 worlds completely separate. I never told my parents about the bank contract. I never told them I had 47 employees. When I visited for holidays, I drove my old car. I wore simple clothes. I let them believe I was just getting by. Why? Because I knew them. I knew that if they saw what I had built, they would try to ruin it. They would try to take credit. Or worse, they would be jealous. I wanted Apex to be mine, purely mine. Then came the game changer. The Department of Defense put out a request for a new cybersecurity infrastructure. It was a massive project. The biggest defense contractors in the world were bidding on it. Companies like Lockheed and Raytheon. My team looked at me. Hazel, we're too small, my lead engineer said. We can't compete with the giants. We're not too small, I said. We're faster and our code is better, we're bidding. We worked for 3 months straight. We barely slept. We built a prototype that blew the competition away. I remember the phone call. It was a Tuesday morning. I was drinking coffee, looking out the window of my office. The phone rang. It was the general in charge of the project. Miss Santos, he said, we've made a decision. My heart stopped. We're going with Apex. I dropped my coffee cup. It shattered on the floor, but I didn't care. Thank you, General, I said, my voice trembling. You won't regret this. The contract was worth $189 million. Overnight, everything changed. Apex went from a respected startup to a major player. We were in the news. The Wall Street Journal wrote a profile on us. Forbes listed us as a company to watch. But here is the thing about my family. They don't read the tech section of the newspaper. They don't follow defense contracting news. They only care about local gossip and car sales. To them, I was still nobody. I went home for my father's 60th birthday party 2 weeks after the contract was signed. The party was at the country club. It was lavish. Expensive wine, a live band, hundreds of guests. Vincent was there naturally. He was telling a group of people about how he had just expanded the dealership to a new town. We're killing it, Vincent bragged. Revenue is up 10%. We are the kings of Rochester. He saw me standing near the buffet table and walked over. He looked a little drunk. Hazel, he said, smirking, glad you could make it. Dad was worried you couldn't afford the gas money to get here. He laughed at his own joke. I'm doing okay, Vincent, I said calmly. Okay. Just okay, he leaned in close. You know, if you ever want to give up on the computer thing, I can get you a job in sales. You'd have to dress better, though. I looked at him. I had just signed a contract worth more than his entire dealership combined. I could buy this country club and turn it into a parking lot if I wanted to. I wanted to scream it in his face. I wanted to pull out my phone and show him my bank account. I wanted to see his jaw drop, but I didn't. I just smiled. "No thanks, Vincent, I'm happy where I am." "Suit yourself," he sneered. "Enjoy your mediocrity." He walked away to get another drink. I watched him go. I felt a strange sense of peace. I didn't need his approval anymore. I knew who I was. I was a titan of industry. He was a car salesman in a small pond. I thought I could keep the secret forever. I thought I could just live my life and let them live theirs. I was wrong. Information travels. Eventually, someone told someone. Maybe a friend of a friend saw the article in Forbes. Maybe someone recognized my face. However it happened, 3 weeks after the contract hit the news, my family found out. And they didn't call to say congratulations. They didn't send flowers. They didn't apologize for years of neglect. They attacked. It was a Monday morning. The sun was shining. I was in my office, meeting with my new CFO, discussing how we were going to allocate the funds for the new research facility. I felt on top of the world. My assistant, Sarah, knocked on the door. She looked pale. "Hazel," she said, "there's a process server here. He says he has legal papers for you." I frowned. "Legal papers for what?" "He says it's urgent." I went out to the reception area. A man in a cheap suit handed me a thick envelope. "Hazel Morty?" he asked. "Hazel Santos," I corrected him. "Also known as Hazel Morty," he said. "You've been served." He walked away. I opened the envelope right there in the lobby. I pulled out the documents. My eyes scanned the first page, and my blood turned to ice. Petition for involuntary bankruptcy petitioner, Vincent Morty debtor. Hazel Morty/Apex Defense Systems. I couldn't breathe. I read it again. It had to be a mistake. The document claimed that Vincent was a founding investor in Apex. It claimed that 8 years ago, he had loaned me $2 million to start the company. It claimed that I had never paid him back, and that with interest and penalties, I owed him a fortune. It claimed that Apex was insolvent, that we were broke and couldn't pay our debts. He was petitioning the court to seize control of my company, freeze my assets, and force us into bankruptcy to pay him back. "This is insane," I whispered. I flipped to the exhibits. There were copies of contracts. There was a promissory note with my signature on it, but I had never signed it. I looked closely at the signature. It looked like mine, but the loop on the H was wrong. It was a forgery. A good one, but a forgery. I flipped to the bank transfer records attached. They showed a transfer of $2 million from the Morty Family Trust to an account in my name. I felt like I was going to throw up. I had never received a penny from them. They were fabricating everything. I ran back into my office and called my lawyer, Mark Henderson. "Mark, you need to get over here, now." When Mark arrived, he read through the papers. His face grew serious. "Hazel," he said, "this is bad. They've filed this in state court. They're asking for an emergency injunction to freeze your accounts. If they get that, the duty contract is dead. The government won't do business with a company that's in bankruptcy proceedings." "But it's a lie," I shouted. I was pacing back and forth. "It's all a lie. Vincent never gave me money." He laughed at me. He told me I was wasting my time. "I believe you," Mark said calmly. "But they have documentation. Forged or not, it looks real to a judge who doesn't know the history. They are trying to kill the company before it even starts." I sank into my chair. I realized exactly what they were doing. This wasn't about money. My father had money. Vincent had money. This was about control. This was about spite. They had found out that the failure of the family was actually the most successful one of all. They couldn't handle it. It broke their worldview. If I was a success, then their treatment of me wasn't tough love. It was abuse. If I was a genius, then they were the idiots for ignoring me. They couldn't accept that. So they decided to destroy me. They wanted to crush Apex so I would be back at the bottom. They wanted to force me to crawl back to them. "They want to ruin me," I said, my voice shaking. "They want to try," Mark said. He stood up and started gathering the papers. "But they made a mistake, Hazel." "What mistake?" "They filed this based on the idea that you're a small, struggling startup. They think they can bully you. They don't realize who you are now." Mark looked at me with a fierce determination. "We're going to fight this, and we're going to hit them back hard." I looked at the forged signature one last time. I felt the sadness in my heart die. The little girl who wanted her daddy's love was gone. In her place was the CEO of a defense contractor. "Do whatever it takes," I told Mark. I'm done being the victim. The court date was set for 3 days later. It was the longest 3 days of my life. I didn't sleep. I spent every hour digging through old bank records, old emails, anything to prove that I was independent. I knew walking into that courtroom would be the hardest thing I ever did. I would have to face my father, my mother, and my brother. I would have to look them in the eye while they tried to destroy my life with lies. But I also knew one other thing. They had no idea what I had become. They were walking into a lion's den, and they thought they were petting a kitten. I was ready walking into the Monroe County Courthouse. That Monday morning felt less like a legal proceeding and more like walking to my own execution. The building was old, built from heavy gray stone that seemed to suck the warmth out of the air. Inside, the floors were polished marble that clicked sharply under the heels of my shoes. The air smelled of floor wax, stale coffee, and anxiety. I was 32 years old. I was the CEO of a company valued at over $300 million. I controlled assets that protected national security. I had negotiated with generals and senators. Yet, as I walked toward courtroom 4 billion, I felt my stomach twist into knots. I felt like the 12-year-old girl sitting at the dinner table, being told I was chewing too loudly. I felt like the teenager being told my interests were weird and wasteful. My lawyer, Mark Henderson, walked beside me. Mark was a calm, steady man with gray hair and a reassuring smile. He carried a thick leather briefcase that contained the truth. Profound silence, Mark whispered as we reached the heavy oak doors. Remember, Hazel, you don't have to say anything until I tell you to. Let them dig their own grave. I know, I said, my voice steady even though my hands were shaking. I'm ready. We pushed open the doors. The courtroom was smaller than I expected, but it felt claustrophobic. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting a sickly yellow glow on everything. And there they were. My family sat on the left side, the plaintiff's side. It was a strategic choice. They wanted to look like the victims. Vincent sat at the counsel table next to his lawyer, a man named Sterling who was known in Rochester for being aggressive, loud, and expensive. Vincent looked immaculate. He was wearing a charcoal gray suit that I knew was custom-tailored. His hair was gelled back perfectly, not a strand out of place. He was leaning back in his chair, tapping a gold pen on the table, looking bored. He looked like a man who had already won. Behind him, in the first row of the gallery, sat my parents. My father, Antonio Morty, was reading a newspaper, as if he were waiting for a barber appointment rather than watching his daughter be sued for bankruptcy. He wore his signature tan coat, looking every bit the respected businessman. My mother, Maria, sat next to him. She was inspecting her fingernails, frowning slightly at a chip in her polish. She wore a silk scarf and her pearls. They looked so comfortable, they looked so righteous. They didn't look at me when I entered. It was a power move, I knew it well. By ignoring me, they were saying I was beneath their notice. They were saying I was already gone. I walked to the defendant's table on the right side and sat down. The wood of the table was cold. I clasped my hands together to stop them from trembling. All rise, the bailiff bellowed, his voice echoing off the high ceiling. Judge Holloway entered the room. She was an intimidating woman in her 60s, with steel-gray hair cut in a sharp bob and glasses perched on the end of her nose. She didn't look like someone who suffered fools. She swept up to the bench, her black robes rustling, and sat down. Be seated, she said, her voice dry and authoritative. She opened the file in front of her. This is case number 24CV-892, Vincent Morty versus Hazel Morty and Apex Defense Systems. Petition for involuntary bankruptcy. She looked over her glasses at the room. I have reviewed the initial filing. Mr. Sterling, you may proceed with your opening statement. Mr. Sterling stood up. He buttoned his jacket with a flourish and walked toward the center of the room. He didn't look at the judge. He looked at the few people in the back of the courtroom, performing for an audience. Your Honor, Sterling began, his voice smooth and oily, filled with fake sorrow. We are here today because of a family tragedy. This is not just a case about money. It is a case about betrayal. It is a case about a brother trying to help a sister and being taken advantage of. I felt the anger rise in my throat, hot and acidic. I bit the inside of my cheek to keep my face neutral. 8 years ago, Sterling continued, pacing back and forth, my client, Mr. Vincent Morty, made a generous investment. He gave his younger sister, Hazel, $2 million of his own personal savings. He did this because she had a dream. She wanted to start a computer company. He said computer company, the way one might say lemonade stand. He believed in her, Sterling said, gesturing to Vincent, who looked down at the table, pretending to be sad. He wanted her to succeed. But sadly, Miss Morty did not have the business acumen to manage such a gift. She took the money. She squandered it on frivolous ideas. And now, 8 years later, her company, Apex Defense Systems, is a shell. My mother dabbed her eyes with a tissue. I stared at her back. I wondered if she actually believed the lies, or if she just didn't care as long as Vincent won. The company has no assets, Sterling declared, raising his voice. It has no revenue. It is a financial disaster. It is insolvent. My client simply wants what is left of the assets frozen so he can recover pennies on the dollar before Miss Morty wastes the rest of it. Lies, I whispered to myself. We have the evidence, Your Honor, Sterling said. We have the promissory note, signed by Miss Morty. We have the bank transfer records. It is an open and shut case of financial mismanagement and breach of contract. He walked back to his table and handed a thick stack of papers to the clerk. Plaintiff's Exhibits A through D. Judge Holloway took the papers. She adjusted her glasses. The room went silent. The only sound was the rustling of paper as she turned the pages. Miss Morty, the judge said, not looking up. You are representing yourself with counsel. Yes, Your Honor, Mark said, standing up. Mark Henderson for the defense. Does your client deny these debts? The judge asked. Categorically, Your Honor, Mark said firmly. Miss Morty denies ever receiving a loan from her brother. She denies signing these documents. And she denies that her company is insolvent. Vincent let out a loud, scoffing laugh. It was sharp and cruel. Oh, give me a break, he muttered, loud enough for the microphone to catch. She's broke, Judge, look at her shoes. My father chuckled behind him. Judge Holloway looked up sharply. Her eyes narrowed. Mr. Morty, she said, her voice cutting like a knife. You will remain silent unless spoken to. Is that clear? Vincent slumped a little in his chair. Yes, Your Honor. The judge turned back to the papers. She looked bored. To her, this was just another family dispute. Another messy squabble over money. She flipped past the promissory note. She flipped past the bank records. Then she reached the cover sheet of the bankruptcy filing. She traced a line of text with her finger. Apex Defense Systems, she read out loud. She stopped. Her finger froze on the page. She blinked once, twice. She leaned forward, bringing her face closer to the paper. She frowned, a deep crease appearing between her eyebrows. Apex Defense Systems, she said again. This time her voice wasn't bored. It was confused. She looked up. She looked at Vincent. Then she looked at me. Then she turned to her computer monitor on the bench. We watched her type. The clicking of her keyboard was rapid staccato. She clicked her mouse. She stared at the screen for a long time. The silence in the room stretched out, becoming heavy and suffocating. My heart was pounding in my chest. Here it comes, I thought. Judge Holloway looked back at the paper, then back at the screen. She took off her glasses slowly and set them on the bench. Mr. Sterling, she said. Her voice was very quiet. You stated in your opening argument that the defendant's company is a shell with no revenue and no future. Is that correct? Yes, Your Honor, Sterling said, looking a little unsure now. That is what my client's investigation revealed. It's a failing startup. A failing startup, the judge repeated. She picked up a piece of paper from her desk. Are you aware, Judge Holloway asked, her voice rising slightly, that a company named Apex Defense Systems was featured on the front page of the Wall Street Journal 3 weeks ago? Sterling blinked. I don't follow the financial news closely, Your Honor. Well, you should, the judge snapped. She turned to me. Miss Morty, or Miss Santos, as I see listed here as your married name. I stood up. Yes, Your Honor. Is your company the same Apex Defense Systems that was just awarded the Level 4 cybersecurity infrastructure contract for the Department of Defense? Yes, Your Honor, I said clearly. The contract valued at $189 million. Yes, Your Honor, that is the base value. With options, it is over $200 million. The courtroom erupted into silence. It was a silence so profound it felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. My father dropped his newspaper. It hit the floor with a soft slap. What? He whispered. That's impossible. Vincent turned pale. All the color drained from his face, leaving him looking like wax. He stared at me, his mouth hanging slightly open. 189 million, Judge Holloway repeated, looking at Vincent with eyes that were now cold and dangerous. Mr. Morty, you are petitioning this court to declare a prime defense contractor bankrupt. You are asking me to freeze the assets of a company that is currently securing national military secrets. Vincent stood up, his legs shaking. I didn't know, he stammered. She never told us. She lives in a dump, she drives a Honda. She didn't have to tell you, the judge said. It is public record. If you were a real investor, you would know. She looked back at the forged documents. If this company is worth hundreds of millions, the judge said, tapping the paper, why would she refuse to pay you $2 million? It makes no mathematical sense. She could write you a check from petty cash. She looked at the signature on the note. She looked at the date. Miss Santos claims these are forgeries, the judge said. And looking at the financials of her company, her motive to lie is non-existent. Yours, however, she let the sentence hang in the air. My mother let out a small, strangled gasp. Vincent, she whispered. What did you do? I think we need a recess, Judge Holloway said. She didn't sound bored anymore. She sounded furious. 10 minutes. Then I want to see both counsel in my chambers. And Mr. Morty, do not leave this building. She banged her gavel. The sound cracked through the room like a gunshot. The bailiff escorted us out into the hallway, but we stayed on separate ends. The tension was thick enough to choke on. My family huddled together near the water fountain. My father was gripping Vincent's arm tight, whispering furiously. His face was red. The calm, composed businessman was gone. He looked panicked. You told me she was broke. I heard him hiss at Vincent. You told me we could take the company for pennies. You said it was a tax write-off. I thought she was. Vincent whispered back, his voice high and strained. She never wears nice clothes. She never talks about work. How was I supposed to know? 180 million, my mother whimpered, leaning against the wall. She looked faint. Oh my God, people are going to find out. The club. The neighbors. I stood near the window with Mark. I felt a strange sensation in my chest. It was lightness. For years I had carried the weight of their judgment. I had walked around feeling like I was less than. But seeing them now, panicked, sweating, turning on each other, I realized they were small. They were tiny, petty people. They are crumbling, Mark said quietly, watching them. Sterling is on his phone. He looks like he's trying to find a way to quit. He can't quit now, I said. We haven't even shown the real evidence yet. Are you ready for the chambers? Mark asked. Or do you want to do it in open court? Open court, I said immediately. I want it on the record. I want everyone to hear it. When the 10 minutes were up, the bailiff called us back in. The atmosphere in the courtroom had shifted completely. Before, it felt like a civil dispute. Now, it felt like a crime scene investigation. The judge was already on the bench, flipping through a law book. She looked up as we entered. I have reviewed the preliminary arguments, Judge Holloway said. Miss Morty, your lawyer indicated you have proof of the fraudulent nature of these documents. I want to see it now. I walked to the podium. I didn't look at my parents. I looked straight at the judge. Your Honor, I said, we have 3 exhibits to enter. Mark handed the folders to the clerk. Exhibit A, I said, is a comprehensive forensic audit of my personal and business finances for the last 10 years. It was conducted by Deloitte as part of our due clearance. It accounts for every single transaction over $500. I paused. There is no record of a $2 million deposit from Vincent Morty. There is no record of any money from the Morty family. The investment never happened. Judge Holloway nodded, reading the audit summary. Go on. Exhibit B, I continued. My company's incorporation documents. Vincent claims he was a founding shareholder. But here are the original filings with the state of New York. I am the sole owner. There are no other names. There never were. And Exhibit C, I said. This was the one I had been waiting for. Exhibit C is a digital forensic report on the contract my brother submitted to this court. I turned my head slightly to look at Vincent. He was staring at the table, sweat dripping down his temple. My security team analyzed the digital file Mr. Sterling emailed to my counsel, I explained. While the document is dated 2017, the metadata within the PDF file tells a different story. I pointed to the screen the clerk had set up. The document was created, I said, my voice ringing out, last Tuesday. 6 days ago, at 4:15 p.m. A gasp rippled through the small audience. Furthermore, I said, the metadata shows the author of the document. It was created on a computer registered to Morty Auto Group Vincent Office. And the software used to create it was a version of Adobe Acrobat that wasn't released until 2023. I looked at the judge. It is impossible for me to have signed this document 8 years ago, Your Honor. Because this document didn't exist until last week. Judge Holloway stared at the report. Her face was a mask of cold fury. She took off her glasses slowly. She looked at Mr. Sterling. "Mr. Sterling," she said. Her voice was dangerously quiet. "Did you know this document was a forgery?" "Your Honor, Sterling stammered. He was backing away from the table, physically distancing himself from Vincent. "I had no idea. I relied on my client's representations. If this is true, I must move to withdraw as counsel immediately." "Denied," the judge barked. "You will sit there and listen to the mess you helped create." She turned her gaze to Vincent. It was a look that could have stripped paint from a wall. "Mr. Morty, stand up." Vincent tried to stand. His knees buckled, and he had to grab the table for support. He looked terrifyingly young in that moment. Not the arrogant businessman, but a scared child. "You came into my courtroom," Judge Holloway said, her voice rising with every word. "You swore an oath on the Bible. And you presented forged documents to this court in an attempt to hijack a federal defense contractor." Vincent couldn't speak. He was hyperventilating. "Do you know what that is, Mr. Morty?" the judge asked. "That is perjury. That is fraud upon the court. That is filing false instruments." She leaned forward. "And given that the victim is a DoD contractor," she added, "you have likely committed federal wire fraud and interference with national security operations." My father stood up. "Your Honor, please," he begged. His voice was cracking. "He didn't mean it. He's just competitive. We can pay a fine. We can withdraw the petition." "Sit down, Mr. Morty," the judge shouted. "This is not a parking ticket. Your son tried to use the legal system as a weapon to destroy his sister's life and business. You don't just pay a fine for that." She turned to the bailiff. "Dismiss the petition with prejudice," she ordered. "And officer, take Mr. Vincent Morty into custody immediately. I am holding him in contempt of court, and I am referring this entire file to the district attorney and the U.S. Attorney's office." "No," my mother screamed. It was a raw, primal sound. "Vincent, no." Two bailiffs moved in. They grabbed Vincent by the arms. He didn't fight. He went limp. "Dad," Vincent yelled as they pulled his hands behind his back. The handcuffs clicked, a sharp, metallic sound that echoed in the silence. "Dad, do something, fix it." My father stood there, his mouth open, his hands hanging uselessly by his sides. For the first time in his life, his money, his influence, his name, none of it mattered. He couldn't fix this. I watched them march my brother out the side door. I watched the door close behind him. The judge looked at me. Her expression softened just a fraction. "Miss Santos," she said, "I apologize that your time was wasted. The petition is dismissed. Your company is safe. You are free to go." "Thank you, Your Honor," I said. I gathered my papers. My hands were steady now. I turned to leave. I had to walk past my parents to get to the exit. My mother was sobbing into her hands, her perfect makeup smeared. My father was staring at the empty door where Vincent had been taken, looking like a ghost. As I walked by, my father looked up. His eyes met mine. They were filled with shock, confusion, and a strange kind of fear. "Hazel," he whispered, "why didn't you tell us? Why didn't you say you were one of them?" "One of the big ones?" I stopped. I looked him right in the eye. "Because, Dad," I said, my voice calm and final, "you never asked. You were too busy laughing at me to ask what I was actually building." I didn't wait for an answer. I pushed open the doors and walked out into the hallway. I walked out of the courthouse and into the bright, blinding sunlight. I took a deep breath. The air tasted sweet. It tasted like justice. The fallout from that day wasn't just a ripple, it was a tidal wave. Because Apex Defense Systems was a government contractor, the FBI didn't take the attempted fraud lightly. They launched a full investigation into Vincent and the Morty Auto Group. It turned out that my forged contract wasn't Vincent's first lie. The FBI seized computers from the dealership. They found 2 sets of books. Vincent had been cooking the accounting records for years to hide gambling debts and skim money for his lifestyle. The charges piled up. Wire fraud, bank fraud, perjury, forgery. The trial was short. The evidence I provided in family court was the nail in his coffin. Vincent faced 15 years in federal prison. His high-priced lawyers managed to plead it down, but he still got 3 years. A felony conviction. I went to the sentencing. I didn't go to gloat, I went to bear witness. I sat in the back row wearing sunglasses. I watched the judge, a different one this time, lecture Vincent on greed and arrogance. When the gavel fell, Vincent looked back. He scanned the room until he found me. He didn't look angry anymore. He looked broken. He looked small. He looked like he finally understood that he wasn't the center of the universe. I didn't smile, I didn't wave. I just watched him be led away. The scandal destroyed my father's reputation. In Rochester, the name Morty had always meant trust and luxury. Now it meant fraud. The luxury car manufacturers, Mercedes, BMW, Audi, read the news. They have strict clauses in their franchise agreements about criminal conduct. One by one, they pulled their licenses. They stripped the Morty name from the buildings. My father lost the dealerships. The empire he had spent 40 years building collapsed in 6 months. He had to sell the big house on the hill. The house where I had been ignored. The house where Vincent had been treated like a prince. It was sold to a developer who planned to tear it down. My parents moved into a small, 2-bedroom condo on the edge of town. About 2 months after Vincent went to prison, my phone rang. I looked at the caller ID. It was my mother. I stared at the phone for a long time. Part of me, the little girl part, wanted to answer, wanted to hear her say she was sorry, wanted to hear her say she loved me, but the woman I had become knew better. I answered. "Hello, Hazel," her voice sounded weak. Older. "Hazel, it's Mom." "I know," I said. "Hazel, this is all so terrible," she wept. "Your father. He just sits in his chair all day. He stares at the wall. We have no money coming in, Hazel. The lawyers took everything, the fines. They took the retirement accounts." "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, keeping my voice polite but distant. "We were thinking," she sniffled. "We read in the paper. Your company, the stock is doing so well. Maybe you could help us, just a loan. Until Dad gets back on his feet. We are family, Hazel." I almost laughed. It was a dark, bitter laugh that stayed inside my chest. It was absurd. After everything, after the neglect, the mockery, the forged documents, the attempt to destroy my life, she still thought she could ask. She still thought I owed them. "Mom," I said. "You sat in that courtroom." You sat there," I interrupted, my voice hardening. "You watched Vincent lie. You watched him try to steal my company. And you nodded, you smiled. You wanted him to win. You wanted to see me fail because it made you feel better about yourselves." "I didn't know it was illegal," she wailed. "I just wanted the family to be together. I thought you were struggling." "Stop," I said. "Stop lying. You didn't care if I was struggling. You preferred it. It made Vincent look better." "But we're your blood," she cried. "We're your parents. You can't let us starve." "You won't starve," I said. "You have a condo. You have social security. You just won't be rich. You won't be the kings of Rochester anymore." "Hazel, please." "Blood isn't enough, Mom," I said. "You broke the contract of family a long time ago. I don't owe you anything." I hung up the phone. My hand was shaking, but not from fear, from adrenaline, from the finality of it. I blocked her number. Then I blocked my father's number. Then there was Carla, my perfect sister, the one who never had a hair out of place. She wrote me a letter. It arrived at my office a week later. It was on expensive, heavy stationery that smelled of lavender. "Dear Hazel, I hope you are well. I wanted to reach out and tell you how shocked I was by what Vincent did. I had no idea. You have to believe me, I am so proud of your success. I'm writing to tell you that I'm separating myself from Mom and Dad. They are toxic. They are stuck in the past. I'd love to come visit you. I heard you bought a house in the Hudson Valley. Maybe we could get coffee. I'm actually looking for investors for a fashion boutique I want to open. I have a great business plan. I thought, as sisters, we should stick together. Women supporting women, right? Love, Carla." I read it twice. It was transparent. It was pathetic. She saw the ship sinking. The Morty ship was going down and she was trying to jump onto my yacht. She didn't want a sister. She didn't want a relationship. She wanted an investor. She wanted my money to replace the money Dad couldn't give her anymore. I took a black marker. I wrote 2 words across the front of the letter, "No thanks." I put it in a fresh envelope and mailed it back. I had cut the cord. It was painful, like cutting off a limb that had turned gangrenous. It hurt, but it was necessary to save the rest of the body. If I kept them in my life, the infection would spread. They would poison my marriage, my company, my happiness. I was alone in terms of blood relatives. But for the first time in my life, I didn't feel lonely. I felt clean. With the lawsuit behind me, a strange thing happened. I stopped looking over my shoulder. Apex Defense Systems didn't just survive, it soared. The publicity from the trial actually helped us. It showed the world that we were a company with a fierce, protective leader. It showed that our ownership was solid and legally tested. Over the next 5 years, we grew from 47 employees to 156. We moved out of the rented office park and built our own headquarters, a beautiful glass and steel building surrounded by woods. It was quiet, it was peaceful. It was the opposite of the chaotic, performative house I grew up in. I worked hard, but I also learned to live. David and I bought a house. It wasn't a showy mansion with columns and statues like my father's. It was a modern, comfortable home with big windows and a massive garden. We didn't throw lavish parties to impress people we didn't like. We had barbecues with our friends, real friends, people who liked us for our jokes and our company, not our bank accounts. Then, the best thing happened. I got pregnant. When our daughter Alina was born, my whole world shifted again. I remember holding her in the hospital room. It was 3 a.m. The world was asleep. She was so small, wrapped in a pink blanket. Her eyes were dark and curious, looking up at me. I looked at her, and I felt a fierce, terrifying love. I looked at her tiny hands, her fragile breath, and I realized something profound. I realized how easy it was to love her. It wasn't work, it wasn't conditional. I didn't need her to be smart or pretty or successful. I just loved her because she existed. I started to cry. David woke up and came over. "What's wrong?" he whispered, stroking my hair. "I just realized how awful they were," I sobbed. "My parents. It wasn't that I was a difficult child, David. It wasn't my fault. They were just broken. They were incapable of loving anything that didn't make them look good." "I know," David said, kissing my forehead. "But you're not them." "I will never let her feel like she isn't enough," I vowed, holding Alina tighter. "Never." As Alina grew, I kept that promise. When she wanted to wear mismatched socks, I told her she looked cool. When she drew a scribbly picture of a cat that looked like a potato, I framed it and put it in the kitchen. When she wanted to play in the mud, I put on old jeans and played with her. I saw her confidence grow. She was loud. She was funny, she was secure. She didn't know what it felt like to be criticized for breathing. One afternoon, when Alina was 3, we were playing in the garden. The sun was setting, casting a golden light over the grass. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a text from an unknown number. I opened it. "Hazel, it's Dad. I heard from a friend that you had a daughter, a granddaughter. Mom and I would love to see her. We're old now, Hazel. We've learned our lesson. Please. Let us meet her. Don't keep her from her family." I stared at the text. My heart skipped a beat. I looked up at Alina. She was chasing a butterfly, laughing, her hair flying in the wind. She was pure joy. I imagined my father walking into this garden. I imagined him making a comment about her hair being messy. I imagined my mother comparing her to Carla's imaginary children. I imagined them whispering their toxic expectations into her ear, planting seeds of doubt that would grow for 20 years. I felt a cold chill run down my spine. "No," I whispered. I didn't reply. I didn't explain. I deleted the text. I turned to Alina. "Come here, sweetie." She ran over and hugged my legs. "What is it, Mommy?" I picked her up. She smelled like grass and baby shampoo. I buried my face in her neck. "I love you just the way you are," I told her. "You don't have to be anything else, ever." "I know, Mommy," she said, giggling. I whispered to her, even though she couldn't understand the full meaning yet. "Your grandparents won't be part of your life," I said softly. "That's not punishment for them, that's protection for you." That was my revenge. My revenge wasn't yelling. It wasn't suing them back. It wasn't ruining them. My revenge was being happy. My revenge was raising a daughter who would never know their toxicity. My revenge was breaking the cycle. The Morty dynasty ended with a whimper in a small, sad condo. The Santos legacy was just beginning, built on love, hard work, and truth. I am sitting in my office now. It is late at night. The building is quiet, just the hum of the servers and the cleaning crew down the hall. From my window, I can see the lights of the city. I can see the highway that leads back to Rochester. I have come a long way from that freezing garage with the broken heater. I wanted to tell this story not because I want pity. I don't need pity. I have a wonderful life. I wanted to tell it because I know there are others out there like me. There are people reading this right now who are the black sheep. People whose families make them feel small. People who are waiting for an apology that will never come. People who are working twice as hard to get half the recognition. I learned something simple and liberating in that courtroom. Family isn't who shares your blood. Family is who believes in your worth. My parents and brother tried to bankrupt me because they wanted to feel powerful. They wanted to put me back in my box. They wanted the world to match their small, petty narrative. Instead, they exposed themselves. They showed the world exactly who they were: jealous, fraudulent, and empty. And they showed me who I was. I wasn't the weak little girl hiding in her room with her computer. I was a fighter. I was a survivor. I was a CEO. I don't hate them anymore. Hate takes too much energy. It binds you to the person you hate. I just feel nothing. They are strangers to me. They are just characters in a bad book I finished reading a long time ago. I closed the book. I put it on the shelf. And I walked away. If you are reading this, and you are hurting because your family doesn't see you, stop looking at them. Stop begging for scraps of affection from people who are incapable of feeding you. Look at yourself. Build your own garage. Write your own code. Create your own life. They might never clap for you. That's okay. You can clap for yourself. And trust me, the sound of your own success, enjoyed in peace and freedom, is the sweetest sound in the world. My name is Hazel Santos. I am the CEO of Apex Defense Systems. I am a wife. I am a mother. And I am free. Share your story in the comments. Have you ever had to walk away from family to save yourself? Let's talk about it. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss a story like this.